take this coat right now, adjust your posture, and get that ugly, worn-out leather bag off the couch before I have security throw your old black ass out on the sidewalk where you belong.
Spencer Royce barked, shrugging his shoulders as he tossed his $1,000 jacket toward the white bench. He didn't even look at her face. To him, the quiet 62-year-old woman sitting in that marble lobby was completely invisible. Just a piece of furniture in a cheap charcoal suit who had spent 4 hours overstaying her welcome.
She's harmless, a total nobody. People like her always think they can just wander into a platinum-level firm and demand charity consultations.
It was the ultimate insult, a display of raw, arrogant class and race contempt from middle management gatekeepers who genuinely believed they ruled the world. But as the executive turned his back and chuckled into his phone, he had no idea. He had just committed the single most expensive mistake of his life. That soft leather portfolio they kept mocking didn't contain a resume or a complaint. It held a $480 million empire and a pen that could erase their entire legacy by sundown. They thought she was the help. They were about to find out she held the keys to their entire existence. Now, before I tell you what was inside that portfolio, and before I tell you what she did with that pen, you need to understand exactly who this woman was. Because the most dangerous person in any room is almost never the loudest one. It is the quiet one in the corner that everybody has already decided does not matter. So let me take you back to the beginning of that morning. Before the coat, before the insult, to the moment a tired-looking woman in a worn coat walked through a set of glass doors, carrying the fate of an empire in her hands. And not one single person in that building bothered to look at her face. Her name was Vivian Ellison, the Honorable Vivian Ellison, though she had not used the title in years, because she had learned a long time ago that the people who truly hold power rarely need to announce it. She was 62 years old. She had grown up in a part of this country where a black girl was not supposed to grow up to be anything in particular, and she had become, in order, the first in her family to finish high school, the first to finish college, a civil rights lawyer who won cases that law schools would later teach, and finally a judge, a federal appellate judge, one of the sharpest legal minds the state of Halvern had ever produced. And when she finally stepped down from the bench, the governor did not let her retire quietly. He asked her to chair something brand new, something the state had built out of a decade of scandal and rage and broken trust. He asked her to chair the State Public Safety Accountability Board, and what that meant, in plain terms, was this: Vivian Ellison, and the board she led, held sole and final authority over the single largest public contract in the entire state, a $480 million master contract for public safety technology, body cameras, evidence systems, training simulators, and the software that decided, in city after city, which neighborhoods got flooded with police and which ones did not. That contract was up for renewal in 9 days, and the company that held it, the company that had held it for years, the company that had built an empire on it, was called the Merrick Group. Now here is the thing you have to understand about Vivian Ellison. The thing that explains everything that is about to happen. She did not have to be in that lobby that morning. She could have summoned the leadership of the Merrick Group to her board's offices downtown. She could have sent her staff and her lawyers and a stack of subpoenas. The chair of the board reviewing your $500 million contract does not have to come to you. You come to her. But Vivian Ellison had spent 30 years on the bench, and she had learned one thing above all others. You do not learn what a company truly is by reading its glossy reports or sitting in its polished conference rooms where everyone is on their best behavior. You learn what a company truly is by watching how it treats a person it believes is nobody. By watching how it treats the people it thinks cannot hurt it. So she had decided to walk into Merrick Tower alone. Dressed plainly. Announce only that she was there about the contract. And sit quietly. And watch. She wanted to see, with her own eyes, what kind of company the state of Halvern had been handing $480 million to. She got her answer. Oh, she got her answer in full. There was one more thing she carried with her that morning. And you need to know about it. Because it is at the center of this entire story. She carried a portfolio. A worn leather portfolio. Soft as an old glove. The leather gone pale at the corners from decades of being held against a chest. Inside it were the things that mattered. The embossed seal of the state of Halvern. A bound copy of the statute that gave her board its power. The law written in the aftermath of scandal. The law that said the board, and the board alone, this, a draft order, 11 pages long, that she had prepared in case she needed it. The order that could terminate the Merrick contract for cause. And a pen, a single, ordinary, well-made fountain pen. That pen had belonged to her mother. Her mother's name was Ruth Ellison. And Ruth Ellison had cleaned office buildings for 31 years. Buildings exactly like Merrick Tower. Marble lobbies, exactly like the one her daughter was about to sit in. For 31 years. Ruth Ellison had pushed a cart across cold floors after the important people had gone home. Emptying their bins. Wiping their glass. And not one of those important people had ever learned her name. To them, she had been invisible, a piece of the building, furniture in a uniform. And one day, with money she did not really have, Ruth Ellison had bought herself a good pen. A nice one. The kind of pen, she told her daughter, that a person uses to sign something that matters. Because Ruth Ellison believed, with everything in her, that one day someone in her family was going to sit at a table where the important people sat, and was going to sign something that mattered. And she wanted there to be a good pen ready. When that day came, Ruth Ellison never got to sign anything that mattered. She died still invisible, still unnamed by the people whose floors she cleaned. But she left her daughter the pen, and on this particular morning, that pen was sitting inside a worn leather portfolio, on a white marble bench, in the lobby of the Merrick Group, where a receptionist with a gold-plated pen of her own was about to laugh at the woman holding it. The city was called Halvern, and the Merrick Group lived in the tallest, coldest, most beautiful building in it. 41 floors of glass and steel and money. Above the front desk, in letters of brushed silver, hung the company's slogan, Public Safety, Reimagined. And underneath that slogan, on a wall of glowing screens, the company displayed its children, Sentinel, the body camera, worn by tens of thousands of officers across a dozen states. Verdict, the evidence platform that held more than 1 million open criminal cases. Crucible, the training simulator that taught officers how to decide, in a fraction of a second, who was a threat. And the crown jewel, the one the brochures spoke of in the most reverent tones. The one that had made Garrett Merrick a very rich and very celebrated man. Predict, predictive policing software. A machine. The company promised. That could tell a city where crime was going to happen before it happened. So police could be there waiting. Vivian Ellison walked through the revolving glass doors of that building at 9:45 in the morning, into all that cold and beautiful light, and she crossed the marble floor toward the front desk. And the morning began. The receptionist's name was Madison Pruitt. She was 30 years old. And she was very good at a particular and quiet kind of cruelty. The kind that never raises its voice and never says anything you could write down. She had a headset and a smile she could turn on and off like a faucet, and a gift, honed over years, for reading a person's exact worth off their clothes and their posture and the color of their skin, and adjusting her warmth precisely to match. She watched Vivian Ellison cross the floor. She took in the worn coat, the plain charcoal suit, the soft old portfolio, the tired eyes, and she made her decision about this woman before Vivian had said a single word. "Can I help you?" Madison said. It was not really a question. There was no warmth in the faucet today. "Good morning," Vivian said. Her voice was calm and even. The voice of a woman who had spent decades being the most measured person in rooms full of people losing their tempers. "My name is Vivian Ellison. I have a meeting with the leadership of the Merrick Group about the contract. It was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Madison's smile did something small and disbelieving. A meeting? With leadership? This woman. She looked Vivian up and down one more time. Slowly, the way you look at something to make sure of what it is. And then she looked back down at her screen. "I don't see anything on the calendar," she said, which may even have been true. Because the meeting had been arranged through the board's office and the names on these things never quite matched. "What did you say this was regarding the master public safety contract?" Vivian said, "It's up for renewal. I'm here to discuss it before the board's decision." And there it was. The board. Madison heard the word, and you could see the exact moment she filed this woman into a folder in her mind. Some low-level functionary, some clerk from some government office, some box checker sent to collect documents. The kind of person you keep waiting, because keeping them waiting is a way of reminding them where they stand in the order of things. "Okay," Madison said, in the flat, a bored tone of someone who has already stopped listening. "Have a seat. I'll let them know you're here." "Thank you," Vivian said, and she went. And she sat down on a long white marble bench against the far wall. And she set her worn portfolio on her lap. And she folded her hands on top of it. And she waited. Here is what Madison Pruitt did next. Nothing. She did not call up. She did not let anyone know. She turned back to her screen, and to whatever conversation was murmuring through her headset. And she let the old woman on the bench become exactly what she had decided she was. Invisible. A part of the lobby. Furniture in a worn coat. And the clock began to move. 10 o'clock came and went. The hour of her meeting passed without a single person coming to the lobby. Vivian Ellison did not check her watch in any obvious way. She did not sigh, or fidget, or march back up to the desk to demand to know what the holdup was. She simply sat, with the stillness of a woman who has sat through long trials and longer deliberations, and she watched, because the waiting, you understand, was not wasted time to her. The waiting was evidence, and what the lobby showed her, over the next 4 hours, was a lesson in who that building thought mattered, written in real time. Right in front of her, at 10:15, a man, in an expensive overcoat, swept through the glass doors, and Madison Pruitt came alive like a flower turning to the sun. "Senator Loomis," she said, and the warmth in the faucet was suddenly all the way open. "They're expecting you upstairs." "Sir." "Go right up. Do you need anything? Can I get you a water? A coffee?" The senator, a man named Wade Lummis, did not break stride. He was waved through to the private elevator within 10 seconds of entering the building. And as the doors closed on him, Vivian watched him laugh at something with a younger man at his side. A sleek lobbyist type, she would later learn was named Tripp Calloway. Of a firm. The Merritt Group paid $1.2 million a year. 10 seconds. The senator got 10 seconds and a warm welcome and an offer of coffee. Vivian Ellison had been sitting on the bench for half an hour, with a 10 o'clock meeting, and she had been offered nothing at all. She filed it away. She was very good at filing things away. She had, after all, spent a career listening to testimony and remembering exactly who said what. Across the morning it happened again and again. Important-looking people swept in and were welcomed and ushered upstairs. Delivery people came and went. A pair of young consultants in matching suits were given coffee and shown to a waiting area with soft chairs. The good kind, not the marble bench. And through it all, the woman in the worn coat on the hard bench remained invisible. People walked past her. People stood near her, talking, as if she were not there at all. As if a 62-year-old black woman in a plain suit generated no more presence than a potted plant. She heard things she was not meant to hear. She always did. People say the most revealing things in front of the people they have decided do not count. There was one person in that entire lobby who saw her. His name was Theo Banks. He was 56 years old, and he was a contract security guard, which meant he stood near the doors in a uniform that was not quite a real uniform, for a wage of about $11 an hour. And he was, in the eyes of the executives who swept past him every day, only slightly more visible than the woman on the bench. Theo Banks had been watching that bench for 3 hours. He had watched the senator get his 10 seconds. He had watched the consultants get their good chairs and their coffee. And he had watched the old woman sit, hour after hour, with her hands folded on her worn portfolio, being offered nothing, being seen by no one. And something about it sat wrong in his chest, because Theo Banks knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible in a building like this one. He lived it every single day. So a little after 1 o'clock, Theo Banks did a small thing, the kind of small thing that does not make the news, the kind of small thing that costs a man nothing and everything at the same time. He walked over to the water station, and he filled a paper cup, and he carried it across that long marble floor. And he stopped in front of the woman on the bench, and he bent down a little, and he spoke to her like she was a human being. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I've watched you sitting here a long while, and nobody's even brought you a glass of water. That's not right. Here." And he held out the cup. Vivian Ellison looked up at him, and for the first time all morning, something in her stillness softened, just slightly, around the eyes. "Thank you," she said, and she took the cup. "What's your name, Theo?" "Ma'am, Theo Banks." "Thank you, Theo Banks," she said, and she meant it in a way that he could feel, though he did not understand why a paper cup of water should mean so much. He did not know who she was. That is the part I need you to hold on to, all the way through to the end of this story. Theo Banks had no idea that the tired woman he brought water to held the fate of this entire company in the worn bag on her lap. He was kind to her when he believed she was nobody. And that, in the end, is the only kind of kindness that ever really counts. Anyone can be kind to a person they know is powerful. The measure of a man is how he treats the people he thinks can do nothing for him. Theo straightened up and gave her a small nod and went back to his post by the doors. And Vivian Ellison held the paper cup in both hands. And she thought about her mother. And she waited. It was almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon, more than 4 hours after her meeting was supposed to begin, when Spencer Royce finally came down. He came out of the private elevator at a half jog, a phone clamped to his ear. Mid-sentence, in a conversation he had clearly decided was more important than whatever he was being sent down to deal with. He was 45 years old, lean in the way of men who pay someone to keep them looking hungry. With a jaw he was proud of, and the bottomless self-assurance of a man who has spent 15 years being the person who makes problems disappear. Spencer Royce was the executive vice president of government affairs for the Merrick Group. Stripped of the fancy title, his entire job was handling. He handled senators. He handled inspectors. He handled the press. And the lawsuits. And the families of the people the company's machines had helped put in prison. And he was very, very good at it. He had handled his way into a corner office and a salary with a lot of zeros. And he had not, in all those years, met a problem he could not make go away with the right mixture of charm, money, and contempt. He had been told there was some board person down in the lobby asking about the contract, and to go down and handle it. And on the elevator ride down, he had pictured exactly the kind of person who shows up unannounced from a government oversight office. A clerk, a box checker, a nobody he could overwhelm with confidence and shoo back out the door in 5 minutes so he could get back to his lunch. He came off the elevator, still talking into his phone, and his eyes swept the lobby, and they landed on the old black woman on the marble bench. And in less than a second, far below the level of any conscious thought, he made his decision about her. The same decision Madison Pruitt had made. The same decision the whole building had made. Nobody. The help. Furniture. And he walked toward her, finishing his call, already shrugging out of his suit jacket as he came, because the lobby was warm and he would be heading right back up. And as he reached the bench, he held the jacket out toward her, dangling it from one finger, in the absent, careless way you hand something to a person whose entire reason for existing is to take things from you. That was the moment. That was the hook. That was the most expensive 90 seconds of Spencer Royce's life. And he had no idea it was happening. Take this coat right now, he barked, not even looking at her face. And get that ugly, worn-out leather bag off the couch before I have security throw your old black ass out on the sidewalk where you belong. He tossed the $1,000 jacket toward the white bench beside her, and from behind her desk, Madison Pruitt laughed into her headset and waved that gold-plated pen toward the door. She's harmless, Madison whispered. A total nobody. People like her always think they can just wander into a platinum-level firm and demand charity consultations. Now watch what Vivian Ellison did, because this is the whole story. Right here. In what she did and did not do. She did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She did not stand up in outrage. She let that $1,000 jacket lie there on the marble beside her where it had fallen. And she looked up at Spencer Royce with a face so calm, so still, so utterly unbothered, that the very stillness of it sent a tiny, cold finger of doubt crawling up the back of his neck. Because in 15 years of handling people, Spencer Royce had learned to read fear and anger and the desperate eagerness of people who want something from you. He knew all those faces. He did not know this one. This was the face of a person who was not afraid of him even slightly. And some animal part of his brain noticed it before the rest of him caught up. I don't work here, Mr. Royce, Vivian Ellison said quietly, and Spencer Royce felt the cold finger press a little harder, because he had not told her his name. Off to the side, near the wall, a woman in a gray cleaning uniform had stopped pushing her cart. Her name was Gloria Mendes, and she had cleaned that tower for 9 years. And not one of the executives whose offices she dusted had ever learned her name either. She had just watched a man throw his coat at a black woman on a bench and tell her to get her body out on the sidewalk where she belonged. And Gloria Mendes stood very still with her dust cloth in her hand. and across 40 feet of cold, imported marble. Her eyes met Vivian Ellison's eyes, and for 1/2 of 1 second, two invisible women understood each other completely, with a depth that did not need a single word. "I see you." That look said, "I know exactly what that bench feels like. I know exactly what this floor feels like under these shoes." "What did you say?" Spencer Royce said. "I said I don't work here," Vivian repeated, in the same even tone. "And I said your name. You're Spencer Royce, Executive Vice President of Government Affairs. You and I had a meeting at 10 o'clock this morning. It's now nearly 2. Spencer Royce recovered fast. He was, whatever else he was, a professional. He draped the contempt back over the confusion the way you throw a tablecloth over a stain. He still did not pick up his coat. He stood over her, which was the point, and he gave her the smile of a man about to be reasonable at someone. "Right," he said. "Ms. Ellison, listen. I think there's been some kind of mix-up with the calendar. We were expecting somebody from the board staff. You know, the technical compliance side. The document room people. I wasn't aware they were sending it." He paused. He had been about to say a lady your age. He course-corrected. "A representative directly. I am a representative directly." Vivian agreed, and then Spencer Royce did something even worse than standing over her. He crouched down. He brought himself down to her level. The way you crouch to talk to a child. Or a doll. Performing a gentleness he wanted credit for. "Here's the thing," he said. Warm and reasonable. Garrett slammed today. The senator thing ran long. A full sit-down with the executive team just isn't going to be realistic. But tell you what, why don't I have one of our compliance people walk you through the data room, get you whatever documents the board staff needs, and we'll set something more formal up down the line. Does that work? I want to make this easy for you. I want to make this easy for you. He smiled when he said it. And here is the thing that Vivian Ellison would think about later. The thing that chilled her most of all. He was not twirling a mustache. He genuinely believed he was being generous. He thought he was managing a small inconvenience with grace and kindness. He had not the faintest, most distant idea that he was. At that exact moment, standing on the edge of the cliff his entire career was about to go over. "Mr. Royce," Vivian said, and her voice did not rise. If anything, it got quieter and quieter. From Vivian Ellison was the sound that trial lawyers had spent decades learning to fear, the way you learn to fear the silence right before the storm hits the house. "I am not from the board staff." "Okay. Well, whoever you're with, I am the chair." The words landed in the cold marble lobby and did absolutely nothing. Because Spencer Royce did not understand them yet. His face did a small, polite, baffled thing. The face of a man who has heard a word he has no slot for. Chair. Chair of what? He had stopped truly listening the moment he had decided who she was. Hours ago. Floors above. On the way down in the elevator. And you cannot undecide a thing like that in a single sentence. It takes the floor falling out from under you. And the floor had not fallen out from under him yet. So Spencer Royce did the thing that handlers do when they are confused. He smiled. And he reached out. And he patted Vivian Ellison on the shoulder. He patted her on the shoulder. Like a coach. Like an uncle. Like a man soothing a confused old woman who had gotten a little above herself. "That's great," he said. "It's great that you're so involved. Really. Tell you what. Miss Chair," and here he actually laughed a little. At his own small joke. "Miss Chair, let me get Don to find you a comfortable spot. And I'll send somebody down." "Okay." You just sit tight." And he stood back up, and he turned his back on the woman who held his company's entire life. Inside the worn leather bag on her lap, and he walked toward the private elevator, lifting his phone back to his ear, and he said into it, in a voice he did not bother to lower, the words that would later be read aloud in rooms full of lawyers. "No, it's nothing. It's some bored lady. He handled it. She's harmless." The elevator doors slid shut on him. By the wall, Gloria Mendez had not moved. She stood there with her cloth in her hand, watching the woman on the bench, and there were tears standing in her eyes. And she could not have told. Vivian Ellison sat very still. Then she opened her worn portfolio, just an inch, just enough, and she looked down into it, at the embossed seal of the state, at the bound statute, written in blood and outrage, the one that said the board, and the board alone, this, at the 11-page draft order, the one that could end the Merrick contract for cause, the one she had brought with her this morning in case she needed it. She had not decided, walking in that morning, whether she would need it. She had decided now. She closed the portfolio. And that is when Don Stryker came across the marble floor to throw her out of the building. Don Stryker was the head of security for the Merrick Group. He was 52, built like a man who used to be a different kind of professional, with a flat face and a quiet voice, and the heavy, unhurried walk of a person who was used to being obeyed. Spencer Royce had radioed him from the elevator. "Get the board lady out of the lobby. Comfortably. If she goes comfortably. But get her out." Because she had been overstaying her welcome for 4 hours, and she was starting to look like a problem. And Don Stryker did not ask questions. Don Stryker handled problems. He came across the floor and stopped in front of the bench. And he did not crouch. And he did not pat her shoulder. And he did not pretend to be kind. He just looked down at her, flat and bored, and said, "Mom, I'm going to need you to come with me. We're going to step outside. I have a meeting." Vivian said calmly, "I've been waiting for it since 10 o'clock this morning." "I understand that," said Don Stryker, who did not care whether he understood it or not. "But there's no meeting on the books. And you've been here a long time. And I've been asked to walk you out. So, let's not make this difficult. Up we go." And he reached down, and he closed his hand around Vivian Ellison's upper arm. And he began to pull her, physically, to her feet. He put his hand on a sitting federal judge. He put his hand on the chair of the board that held his company's $500 million contract. He laid hands on a 62-year-old woman on a bench to drag her toward the door. Because everyone in that building had decided she was, and you can do anything you want to a nobody. And that is when a voice cut across the lobby. Don, take your hand off her." It was Theo Banks, the contract security guard, the $11 an hour man by the doors. He had crossed half the lobby in a few strides, and he was standing there now. And he had said the one word that not a single executive, not a single highly paid professional, not one person on all 41 floors of that glass tower had been brave enough to say all morning. He had said don't, to his own boss, to the head of security, Theo Banks, who had everything to lose and nothing at all to gain, who did not know and did not care who that woman was. Looked at Don Stryker with his jaw set and his heart no doubt hammering in his chest. And he said it again. "You don't put your hands on her. I don't care who told you to. You don't drag a lady out of here like that. It's not right, and you know it's not right." The lobby went very quiet. Don Stryker's hand was still on Vivian's arm. He turned his flat face toward Theo, and there was a warning in it. The warning of a powerful man to a powerless one. A warning that said, "You are about to lose this job. You understand that you are about to lose everything over this." And Theo Banks looked back at him and did not move. And in the middle of that frozen moment, the glass doors of Merrick Tower swung open, and a woman walked in fast, in a sharp, dark suit, with a leather case in one hand and a phone in the other. And her eyes swept the lobby and found the bench, and her whole face changed. Her name was Renee Okafor. She was 35 years old, and she was the chief of staff to the State Public Safety Accountability Board, which is to say, she worked for the woman that Don Stryker was at that moment holding by the arm. Renee had been parking the car. She had dropped Vivian at the doors hours ago for the 10 o'clock meeting and gone to deal with something at the office. And she had come back to collect her. And she had walked in to find the head of security physically hauling the Honorable Vivian Ellison off a bench while a guard tried to stop him. Renee Okafor crossed that lobby in about 4 seconds. And her voice, when it came, was the crack of a whip. "Take your hand off, Judge Ellison. Right now." Everything stopped. "Judge." The word went through the lobby like a current through water. Don Stryker's hand opened. Madison Pruitt's head came up from behind the desk, the gold pen frozen in her fingers. And Renee Okafor reached the bench and turned, putting herself between Vivian and Don Stryker. And she looked around that cold and beautiful lobby, at the receptionist and the security chief, and the marble, and the silver slogan on the wall. And she said, in a voice that carried to every corner of the room, "Do you have any idea who you have had sitting on a bench for 4 hours? Do you have the faintest idea who you just put your hands on? This is the Honorable Vivian Ellison, retired federal appellate judge, chair of the State Public Safety Accountability Board. She is the chair of the board that decides, in 9 days, whether the $480 million contract that pays for this building gets renewed or gets torn up. She is the single most important person who will walk through your doors this year. And you threw a coat at her, and you sent your security to drag her out into the street." The silence that followed was the most expensive silence in the history of the Merrick Group. Madison Pruitt had gone the color of paper. Don Stryker had taken a full step back, his flat face suddenly not so bored. His mind, no doubt, racing through every camera in that lobby, and exactly what they had recorded. And somewhere on the 38th floor, in a corner office, a phone was about to ring, and a man named Garrett Merrick was about to have the worst afternoon of his professional life. Through all of it, Vivian Ellison rose slowly to her feet. She did not need Renee to fight for her, and Renee knew it, and stepped back the moment she had said her piece. Vivian stood, and she smoothed her plain charcoal suit, and she gathered her worn leather portfolio against her chest, the one they had mocked, the one with the seal and the statute and the 11-page order and her mother's pen inside it. And she looked, not at Don Stryker, and not at Madison Pruitt. She looked across the lobby at the one person in that building who had treated her like a human being. She looked at Theo Banks. "Thank you, Theo," she said quietly, "for the water, and for that." And Theo Banks, who had just risked his job for a stranger, did not yet understand what he had done, only stood there and gave her a small, uncertain nod. Then Vivian Ellison turned to the white-faced receptionist at the desk. "Ms. Pruitt," she said, reading the name off the little plate. "I believe my meeting was at 10 o'clock. It is now 2. Please inform Mr. Merrick and his executive team that the chair of the State Public Safety Accountability Board is on her way up. All of them, in the main boardroom. Now," she paused, "and bring whoever takes your official minutes." I want everything that is about to be said written down. The elevator ride to the 38th floor took 90 seconds, and Vivian Ellison spent it in silence, with her portfolio held against her chest, the way her mother had carried things for 31 years. The boardroom of the Merrick Group was a long room of glass and dark wood, with a table the size of a small boat, and a wall of windows that looked out over the whole city of Halvern. The whole city, including, if you knew where to look, the neighborhoods the company's software had painted red. By the time the elevator doors opened, the room was full and frantic. Garrett Merrick was there, the founder, the chief executive, 58 years old, silver-haired, a man who had built this empire out of a garage and a single good idea and 26 years of relentless ambition, and who had been pulled out of another meeting with the words, "You need to come now. There's a situation with the board." Spencer Royce was there, the color draining out of his proud jaw as the pieces fell into place in his mind, as he replayed the coat, replayed the crouch, replayed the words he had said into his phone. Don Stryker stood against the back wall. Lawyers were arriving, and in the corner, quietly, a woman in a gray suit had set up a small stenography machine, the official court reporter the board had asked for, and her name was Carol Whitfield. And she had transcribed depositions for 30 years, and she had never once been asked to leave anything out. Vivian Ellison walked into that room, and without a word, she walked the entire length of that enormous table, past every executive, and she sat down in the chair at the head of it, Garrett Merrick's chair, the chair at the head of his own table, in his own boardroom, on the 38th floor of his own tower. She set her worn portfolio on the dark wood in front of her, and she folded her hands on top of it, and she let the silence stretch until it was unbearable, until every person in that room was looking at her. And then she spoke. "My name is Vivian Ellison. I think most of you know by now what I do." Her voice was calm and level, and it filled the room without ever rising. "I arrived in your lobby this morning at 9:45 for a meeting scheduled at 10. It is now just after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. In the 4 hours I sat downstairs, I want to tell you what happened to me, because Ms. Whitfield is going to write it down, and I want the record to be complete and precise. Precision, as it happens, is the entire occupation of my life." And then, in that calm and devastating voice, the Honorable Vivian Ellison recounted the morning act. On the record, word for word, she told them how she had been told to have a seat and then left, uncalled, for 4 hours. She told them how Senator Loomis had been welcomed and ushered up in 10 seconds while she sat ignored. She told them, without heat, exactly what Spencer Royce had said to her. Every word of it. The coat, the leather bag, the part about her old black body belonging on the sidewalk. And she watched Spencer Royce's face go from white to gray as she said it, as he understood, finally and fully, that every contemptuous word had been spoken to the one person on earth with the power to end everything he had. She told them what the receptionist had said. She told them that the head of their security had put his hands on her and tried to physically drag her from the building. And she told them that in 4 hours, the only person in their entire company who had treated her like a human being was a contract security guard earning $11 an hour, a man named Theo Banks, who had brought her a cup of water, and who had then risked his job to stop their own head of security from laying hands on her. "I tell you all of this," Vivian said, "not because my feelings were hurt. My feelings are not the business of this board, and they are not why I am here. I tell you because how a company treats a person it believes is powerless is the truest test there is of that company's character. You did not know who I was. That is precisely the point. You treated me the way you treat anyone. You have decided does not matter. And I am here, with the power to decide the future of your largest contract. To find out whether the way you treated me in that lobby is the same way you treat the public whose safety you have been paid $480 million to protect. She opened the worn portfolio. So now, she said, let's talk about what is actually inside your machines. What Vivian Ellison laid on that table next was the thing the Merrick Group had spent years and a great deal of money making sure no one with power would ever lay on a table. The board, before this meeting, had done its homework. It had commissioned an independent audit of the company's crown jewel, Predict, the predictive policing software that told cities where to send their police. And the audit had found something that the brochures never mentioned. Predict did not predict crime. Predict predicted policing. It fed on years of arrest data. And that arrest data was the record of decades of officers being sent, again and again, into the same neighborhoods. The black neighborhoods, the poor neighborhoods, and finding there exactly what extra policing always finds, which is more arrests, which the machine then read as more crime, which the machine then used to recommend sending still more police back into those same neighborhoods tomorrow. A closed loop. A machine that took a city's oldest prejudices, laundered them through an algorithm, and handed them back as a clean, scientific, color-coded heat map that no one could argue with. Because it was just math. The independent audit of Predict. Vivian said, sliding a copy down the long table. You found that your software directs officers to predominantly black neighborhoods at a rate 41% higher than it directs them to white neighborhoods with statistically identical crime rates. 41%. I have here a map of your system's recommendations, laid over a map of the racial demographics of this city. I would invite anyone at this table to look at the two maps and tell me they are not the same map. No one at that table picked up the copy. No one wanted to touch it. But here is the part, Vivian said, that turns a tragedy into something else. Something the law has a great deal to say about. Because a company can make an honest mistake. A company can build a flawed tool without knowing it is flawed. That is negligence. And it is bad enough. But it is not what happened here. What happened here is that somebody at this company found the flaw, measured it, wrote it down, and was buried for it. And she took out a memo, a 2-year-old internal memo. This was written, Vivian said, 26 months ago, by a data scientist in your own company, a young man named Darnell Pierce. He is 29 years old, and he is, by every account I have read, brilliant. And he did the most dangerous thing a person can do inside an institution like this one. He was right too early, and he put it in writing. In this memo, Mr. Pierce identified the racial bias in Predict with precision. He laid out the closed feedback loop. He warned, in plain language, that the company was selling cities, a tool that would deepen exactly the injustice it claimed to solve, and that when this became public, and he wrote that it would become public, the company and its clients would face enormous legal and moral liability. He recommended the system be suspended and rebuilt. He sent this memo up the chain. She looked down the table. She looked, in particular, at Spencer Royce, and the chain buried it. Mr. Pierce was told the model was fine. He was told not to put such things in writing. And then, over the following months, Mr. Pierce was quietly moved off the Predict team, given a poor performance review that contradicted every review he had received before, and managed, deliberately, toward the door. He was punished for telling the truth. I have the memo. I have his original reviews. I have the email, signed by an executive in this room, approving his reassignment 3 weeks after he raised the alarm. You did not just build a machine that launders racism. You knew it did. And you spent 2 years and a great deal of effort silencing the one honest person who tried to stop you. So that this contract, the $480 million contract, you would renew on schedule and no one would ask any questions. The boardroom was utterly silent now. Carol Whitfield's fingers moved steadily on her stenography machine, taking down every word. And while you were burying Mr. Pierce, Vivian went on, you were spending $1.2 million a year on a lobbying firm, Callaway Strategic, to keep people like Senator Wade Lummis comfortable and friendly. The same Senator Lummis your receptionist welcomed so warmly this morning while I sat on a bench. I am not here to make accusations about the senator. That is for others to look into. And they will. I am simply noting. For the record, the contrast. You had $1.2 million a year for lobbyists. You had $480 million in public money for your machines. And you could not spare 4 hours, or 1 cup of water, or 1 honest answer. For the people you decided did not matter. That contrast is your company. It is written all over this morning. And it is written all over this audit. And the two tell the exact same story. It was at this point that Garrett Merrick finally spoke. Because Garrett Merrick was a fighter. You do not build an empire out of a garage by folding the first time someone stronger walks into the room. So he tried. Of course he tried. He had spent 26 years making problems disappear. And he reached now for the 3 tools that had never once failed him. First, he reached for the threat, dressed as concern. Judge Ellison, he said, leaning forward, putting on the low, reasonable, partner-to-partner voice. The closer's voice. I hear you. I do. And some of what you've described is genuinely unacceptable. And there will be consequences for it. You have my word. But let's be practical adults for a moment. Because that is what this situation requires. If you terminate this contract, you do not hurt me. You hurt the public. 40,000 body cameras go dark. Evidence systems holding 1 million open cases. Who maintains those 3,000 officers, mid-training on Crucible? What happens to them? You would not be punishing Merrick. You would be throwing a grenade into public safety for this entire state. And every bad outcome that follows would be on your Mr. Merrick, Vivian said, and her voice did not change. Are you threatening the people of this state with their own safety? In a transcribed proceeding, in order to protect your contract? Because that is what I just heard. I heard a man say, give me my $480 million, or something bad might happen to the public. She glanced at the corner. Ms. Whitfield, did you get that word for word? Your Honor, said the woman in gray. So Garrett tried the second door. The reasonable fix? Then, let us fix it together. He said quickly. You found problems. Fina, we will fix the problems. We will retrain the model. We will bring in your universities to audit it. We will put Pierce back on the team. Give him a title. A raise. Make him a vice president. Put him in front of the cameras. A black engineer who built the fix. That is a powerful story. Now you want to use him too. Vivian said, very softly. You buried him for telling the truth. And now that the truth is coming out anyway. Do you want to dress him up and stand him in front of a camera and use his face to clean yours? No. Mr. Merrick. And so Garrett Merrick reached for the third door. The last door. The one that In 26 years, every single problem in his life had eventually walked through. Then name your number. He said, whatever the board needs. A reform fund. A community investment program. We will endow a center for algorithmic fairness. We will put your name on it. Everyone walks out of this room a winner. Just tell me, what is the number? And the Honorable Vivian Ellison looked at him with something that was almost pity. You still think I am for sale? She said, because you still think I am the help. You have spent this entire meeting trying to work out what I will take to pick up the coat. There is no number. Mr. Merrick, you cannot pay me. My mother cleaned buildings exactly like this one for 31 years. And men exactly like you never once learned her name. And there is not enough money in your entire empire to buy back a single good morning she never got. So put your checkbook away. It is the only language you speak, and I do not speak it. And she opened the worn portfolio one last time. And she took out the 11-page order. And she uncapped her mother's pen. Here is what is going to happen. She said, and I am going to be very precise. For the record, because precision is the whole of my profession. 1. The master public safety contract held by the Merrick Group will not be renewed. I will recommend that to the full board with my unqualified support. And on the strength of this audit, I expect that vote to be unanimous. 2. The existing contract is suspended for cause on a responsible transition timeline that my board will set together with the state, not to protect Merrick. Mr. Merrick, to protect the public from the grenade you just threatened to throw. Because unlike you, I actually care what happens to those cases, and those officers, and those cameras. You will cooperate fully with that transition, or the termination becomes immediate and total. Your choice. 3. The predict system is suspended from use in this state as of today. Not retrained, not patched, suspended. A machine that launders racism into a heat map does not get a software update. It gets turned off. Phew. This audit, the Pierce memo, the findings on your lobbying, and the complete transcript of everything said in your lobby and in this room today are being referred this afternoon to the Office of the State Attorney General and to the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. What they choose to do with it is their decision, not mine. I am a referral. Mr. Merrick, I am not your judge. I used to be a judge. Now I am simply the person who turns on the lights and calls the people whose job it is to look at what is underneath. And 5. She signed the order. The pen moved across the paper. Slow and certain. The same hand. The same straight spine. 50 years in the making. 5. Effective immediately. This board is opening a formal inquiry into the employment retaliation suffered by Darnell Pierce. As of this moment, he is a protected whistleblower. And if one hair on his career is harmed between now and the end of that inquiry, the people responsible will answer for it personally. She capped the pen. She slid the signed order down the length of the long table, and it came to rest in front of Garrett Merrick, who did not pick it up, who could not seem to make his hand move toward it at all. You sold the whole state a machine for deciding who was dangerous, Vivian Ellison said, rising from the chair at the head of his table, gathering her worn portfolio against her chest. And you never once imagined being the one in the chair, being looked at, being decided about. You built the most powerful surveillance company in this state, and you forgot the only rule that has ever truly mattered. She looked at Garrett Merrick, and at Spencer Royce against the wall, and out the great windows at the city full of red zones. Somebody is always watching the watchers. This morning, in your own lobby, it was a security guard named Theo Banks, and it was me. And she walked the length of that boardroom and stepped into the elevator, and the doors slid shut on the most expensive silence in the history of the Merrick Group. Now here is something the powerful never quite believe until it happens to them. The very same machinery that makes a man look untouchable is the machinery that destroys him fastest once it turns. The Merrick Group had spent 26 years building an apparatus of credibility. The contracts, the press, the conferences, the senators who returned the calls, the mystique that whispered. These are the serious people, the safe choice, the grown-ups in the room, and that apparatus did not protect Garrett Merrick when the lights came on. It only made the fall louder, because the higher you have stacked, the appearance of being beyond question, the longer the way down when the question finally arrives. It started with a transcript. Carol Whitfield, the court reporter in the gray suit, the woman who had taken down every word, produced a clean, certified, time-stamped record of everything. The coat, the part about the sidewalk, the words, "she's harmless," the grenade Garrett threw at public safety, the bribe, "name your number," all of it, in plain black and white, sealed by an officer of the court. That document went to the state attorney general on a Tuesday. By Thursday, it had reached the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, and by the following Monday, through one of those leaks that no one ever admits to and everyone benefits from, it had reached the press, and the city of Halvern woke up to a headline. The predict audit hit the internet in full. 41%. The map of the red zones laid over the map of the black neighborhoods. The two pictures nearly identical. The kind of image that needs no caption at all. Civil rights organizations that had been fighting predictive policing for a decade suddenly had the one thing they had never been able to get: the company's own numbers. In the company's own words, with the company's own buried memo proving they had known all along, Merrick stock opened down 9%. By the closing bell, it was down 31%. And then the dominoes fell, one after another. In the particular rhythm of an empire, learning it was never as solid as its own brochures. The state next door, the one Spencer Royce used to brag about at conferences, and announced it was pausing deployment of predict pending review. Pausing. That is the word they use right before terminating. 2 days later, a third state followed, then a county the size of a small country, then the flagship city, to the logo on the slide. Gone. Its mayor on television, saying she was deeply troubled by what the documents revealed, and every single one of them had its own version of Darnell Pierce. Some honest engineer who had raised a hand in a meeting and been told to sit down, and now those engineers were forwarding their own buried emails to their own attorneys general. Because the Ellison referral had done the one thing that breaks the spell of an untouchable institution. It proved the institution was touchable. People stay quiet only as long as silence looks like the only option. Vivian Ellison had shown them another door, and they ran through it in a stampede. The Merrick board held an emergency meeting that ran past 2 a.m. And you already know what a board does when the stock is down 31% and the Justice Department is at the door. A board does not have loyalty. A board has liability. By sunrise, Garrett Merrick had stepped down to focus on the legal challenges facing the company. Step down. The softest words in the language wrapped around the hardest fall. The man who had said, "Name your number," was walked out of Merrick Tower by the very security team he had built, past the front desk, where a woman had been told to take a seat, and out through the glass doors a guard named Theo had once held open for a judge, and Spencer Royce. Spencer Royce was not lucky enough to be merely fired, though he was certainly that. The transcript named him. The civil rights complaint named him. The retaliation findings named him. Because it was Spencer Royce who had signed off on burying Darnell Pierce's memo. The man who threw his coat at a federal judge because he could not imagine a black woman in that lobby being anything but the help. Spent the next years of his life explaining himself to lawyers. The mystique was gone. That was the real collapse. Not the stock. Not even the contracts. But the mystique. The aura of the serious and the safe and the unquestionable. And once the public has seen the memo and the map and the coat and the bribe, the slogan, Public Safety Reimagined, becomes a punchline. And a punchline is the one thing an empire of seriousness cannot survive. But here is what I need you to understand. Because it is the part that actually matters. The collapse is the part the cameras love. The empty chief executive's chair. The falling stock chart. The perp walk that always seems about to happen. The collapse is the part everybody watches. But the collapse was never the point. Garrett Merrick, losing his company, does not put a single dollar back in the pocket of a man who was pulled over again and again because a machine painted his neighborhood red. Punishment is not repair. Consequences for the guilty are not the same thing as justice for the harmed. Vivian Ellison knew that better than anyone alive, because she had spent 30 years on the bench watching the system confuse the two. So while the cameras chased the collapse, she did the quieter, harder, unglamorous work. And she did it with and for the people who had been in that lobby. Start with Theo Banks, the contract security guard, the $11 an hour man who brought a stranger a cup of water and then put his own hand on his own boss and said the one word nobody else in that building had the courage to say. Vivian did not forget him. People with power love to say they never forget the little people. And then they forget. Vivian was not built that way. When her board built a new system of oversight, one of the very first things she insisted on was that the people who actually staff these buildings, the guards and the clerks and the cleaners, the workforce, the executives look straight through, would have a real, protected channel to report what they see. She called it frontline witness protection, and Theo Banks was offered and accepted a role helping to build it, training other guards on what it means to say, don't, and how to do it safely. The man who had earned almost nothing to be invisible spent the back half of his career teaching the institution how to see, and he never let them make him a mascot. When a reporter wanted to do the feel-good segment, Hero Guard's single act of kindness, Theo said no. He said, I gave a lady a cup of water. The story is not that I did it. The story is that I was the only one who did. Then there was Darnell Pierce, the young data scientist who had been right too early and had written it down. The board's whistleblower inquiry, the one Vivian opened with the fifth stroke of her mother's pen, found in his favor on every single count. The retaliation, documented. The buried memo, authenticated. And here is the part that matters more than the finding. Vivian Ellison did not let Darnell Pierce be merely cleared and then quietly forgotten. When the state began designing the new standard for how any algorithm could ever again be used in public safety, she put Darnell Pierce at the very center of building it. Not as a symbol, not as the black engineer for the photograph, which is exactly what Garrett had tried to make him in his last desperate pitch, but as the actual expert who actually understood the actual machine. Because he did. And everyone in the room knew it. The man they tried to bury wrote the rules the barriers would now have to live under. There is a justice in that the courts cannot manufacture, and only the truth can. There was a cleaning woman. You remember her? Gloria Mendez. In her gray uniform, the woman whose eyes met Vivian's across the marble, in the moment the coat fell. 9 years she had cleaned that tower, and not one executive whose office she dusted had ever learned her name. The very crime Vivian had named to Garrett. When the reforms were written, Vivian made certain the overnight crews, the contractors, the invisible workforce of every glass tower, were inside the protection, not outside it, because the woman pushing the cart sees everything. She is in every room after everyone has gone home. She is the most thorough witness in the building, and the one no one has ever thought to ask. Vivian asked. Her mother had taught her to, by being the woman no one asked. For 31 years, and there was Madison Pruitt, the receptionist with the gold-plated pen. She did not get fired. And that matters. Because the lesson of this story is not that everyone who failed that morning should be destroyed. Madison was underpaid and actively trained by the culture of that building to read a person's worth off their shoes and their skin and adjust her warmth to match. She was a symptom, and you do not cure a disease by punishing its symptoms. But she was there. Months later, the day Vivian came back to that tower for a transition hearing, walking again through those same glass doors, across that same marble, toward that same desk, and Madison Pruitt went white, because she had watched the news, and she knew now exactly who she had told to take a seat. She started to stammer an apology, and Vivian Ellison, who could have ended that young woman's morning the way her own had been ended. I did something else. Instead, she leaned in, quietly, just for Madison to hear. And she said, "You did not know who I was. That is not the problem. The problem is that it should not have mattered who I was. The next person who stands at your desk in a worn coat is going to be nobody important at all. Just a tired person who needs something. That is the one I need you to see. And I think you can. That is why I am telling you." Instead of telling your supervisor, Madison Pruitt did not cry until the judge had walked away, but she became, by every account, the kind of person at a front desk who saw the tired and the worn and the nobody important, and treated them like they were somebody, which they always were. That is what reform looks like at the level of one single human heart. Not a perp walk. A young woman learning to see. And then there was the framework. The thing that outlasts every person in this story. Vivian Ellison's board. With the full weight of that $480 million decision behind it, and the whole country now watching. Wrote a new standard. With teeth. The kind of standard other states copy, because copying it is easier than inventing it. And it rested on a few plain principles, and you should know them, because they are the actual point of everything you have just heard. That no algorithm may be used to direct policing in this state unless its bias has been independently audited and the audit made public. No more secret math deciding the fate of a neighborhood. That any predictive tool which produces racially unequal outcomes is presumed unlawful until the company selling it proves otherwise. They flipped the burden off the community being crushed and onto the people who built the machine. That every public safety contractor must keep a real, tracked, transparent channel for complaints from the public and from its own workers. And that retaliating against a truth teller is itself a violation with real consequences. And finally, that a permanent civilian oversight board, independent, funded, with the power to demand documents and to turn off a machine, would watch the watchers, not a panel that meets twice a year and issues a report no one reads. A standing body, with the authority to open the box, because that was the question. Wasn't it? From the very beginning. Who watches the watchers? for 26 years? The answer at the Merrick Group had been, no one. That was the whole business model. Sell the watching, escape the watching, and bank the difference. And then one tired-looking woman in a worn coat sat on a marble bench for 4 hours. And the answer changed. A year later, there is a lobby. It is not Merrick Tower. Merrick Tower has a different name on it now, because empires that lose their mystique tend to lose the lease as well. This is a different building. A plain, public building. The kind of place where ordinary people come to file things, and fix things, and ask the state for what they are owed. There is a security desk, and a person behind it, and a row of chairs against the wall where people wait. And an older woman comes in out of the cold. Worn coat, tired eyes, a folder held against her chest. And she is nobody important. Not a judge. Not the chair of anything. Just a woman who has come to sort out a benefit that stopped arriving. The kind of small problem that used to mean a whole day lost inside a building that did not care. The young man at the desk looks up, and he sees her. Not her shoes. Not her coat. "Here. Good morning," he says. And he means it. And he comes around the desk to help her find the right window. And he calls her ma'am, the way you would call your own mother ma'am. And the whole thing takes 90 seconds. And it costs nothing. And it changes the entire texture of one tired person's day. He has no idea why the building runs this way. He has never heard the name Predict. He does not know that the tracked complaint channel on the wall behind him, and the poster about a worker's right to report without fear, and the whole quiet culture of that building that says, see the person. He does not know that all of it traces back to a marble lobby across town, and a coat thrown at the wrong woman, and a guard who said don't, and a pen that once belonged to a cleaning woman named Ruth. He does not need to know. That is what reform is. It is the thing that keeps working long after everyone has forgotten the story that made it. And across town, the Honorable Vivian Ellison sits at her own kitchen table, in the early light, with a cup of coffee and the morning paper. She still takes on actual paper. Beside her on the table is the worn leather portfolio, retired now, soft as an old glove, and inside it, where it has always been, is her mother's pen. She picks it up sometimes, not to sign anything, just to hold it, to feel the weight of the thing her mother carried through 31 years of being unseen. The small, ordinary object that a cleaning woman bought herself. Because a woman who owns a good pen is a woman who still expects, one day, to sign something that matters. Ruth Ellison never got to sign it. Her daughter signed it for her, at the head of a billionaire's table, and turned on the lights. So let me ask you something. Before you go, that morning in the lobby, before anyone knew who she was, before the reveal and the falling stock and the headlines, when she was just a tired woman, in a worn coat being told to take a seat, every single person in that building made a choice about how to treat her. The gatekeeper made a choice. The executive made a choice. The head of security made a choice. And one man, earning almost nothing, with nothing to gain and his own job to lose, made a different choice. He brought her water. He said, don't. He was kind to her when he believed she was no one. That is the whole point. So here is the question I want you to sit with tonight, because it is the only question this story was ever really asking. When you do not know who someone is, when there is no title, no reveal coming, no medal, when they are just a tired person in a worn coat, that the whole world has decided to look straight past. Who are you? In that lobby, are you the one who throws them the coat, or are you the one who brings the water? Be honest with yourself about it. And then go. And be the one who brings the water. Because somebody is always watching. Make sure that when they do, they see the best of you. If this story moved you, do me one small favor. Hit that like button so it reaches one more person who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who has ever been made to feel invisible. And subscribe, because every week we tell the stories of the unseen, the underestimated, and the quietly powerful, the people the world looks straight through, right up until the moment they decide whether your empire lives. Odis, we see you. We always have, and I will see you in the next one.